Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Yakuza Fiancé Season 1, Episode 11. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, we had an opening. I don't know if it was like the anniversary of her father's death or something, but I don't know. It was like a family plot thing, so I don't know if it's like for her mom and her dad, but I assume it was their dad because they talked about his Yoshino's dad specifically, because they left like a special bottle of sake. It's like, oh, was my dad a sake drinker? It's like, no, he didn't. He wasn't, didn't really like alcohol and stuff like that, or maybe just didn't like mess with sake because he couldn't really handle it. Either way, we also bring up the fact is that he was 19 years old when he got married, and Yoshino's like that's literally a year away. And also Renji's like, yo, you're wearing makeup, and she's like, oh yeah, a little bit. He's like, well, it's not doing a good enough job like making you prettier. Like, it didn't even change your face that much. But we find out that was messed up on Renji's part. But later on, we find out why she was wearing makeup at all. Tsubaki helped her put on makeup to cover her wounds. We find out about the two situations. Like, cool, Dennis can fix that right up. So we also learn about Tsubaki and Shoma's relationship. They butt heads a lot. Her calling him a man whore, him calling her a dirty bitch. You're like, Jesus. And it's like, yeah, they've always had this relationship. I guess like upon the first time, like I don't know how long ago it was because they look relatively the same. So I don't know if it's like only recently they met, or maybe it was like, because she specifically said like whenever Tsubaki came down to see me for the first time or whatever, that's when her and Shoma met. And it's like they ran into each other naked and they immediately looked down to each other's genitals. And so, yeah. I'm curious. For a second, I was like, you don't think... I mean, that definitely feels like that could be a haters to lovers situation going on there, but who knows? Because Tsubaki is Tsubaki, and she's kind of poking the bear with Shoma, because she's talking about like, oh yeah, Shoma's really pissed about everything, but Yoshino's like, nah, he can't be... Well, he is upset with her, and she understands that. But either way, they go to like a gathering, and Kirishima's there with Yoshino, and he's like, oh, do you like my granddaughter? He's like, yeah, I do. He's like, I love her more than anyone else in the world, and everyone from the Some group is kind of like, what the hell did that bastard just say? But also, like, Renji's perspective of, I actually kind of hate how much you remind me of your grandfather. He's like, it almost feels like my buddy Gaku is, like, right here in front of me, like, a friend that I've known for so long is trying to, like, date my granddaughter. It's weird. But we also find out this story he told about him and Gaku about like, oh yeah, I borrowed Gaku's car, kind of drove it into a river, and I brought him a bike with like the rear view mirror, one of the rear view mirrors attached to it. And it's like, oh, what did he do? It's like, oh, he literally laughed like Kirishima's over there laughing. Gaku did the exact same thing. And then he proceeded to beat the ever-living shit out of me to the point I thought I was going to shit my pants. It's like, wow. And I thought something was up, and I thought was interesting when that guy shows up that Kirishima talks about later on. It's like, well, he was the guy who was sent to kind of look after Yoshino for a while until like he got promoted. But we'll get to that in a second. And then, it's like, oh, like we got some business to handle, and he told Shoma, "Hey, come to the basement." And then we never saw what happened with Shoma, but we see Kirishima, and was like, "What the fuck?" And then like Kirishima looks and there's blood. He's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Shoma just came down." And I was like, "Was that from Shoma getting the shit beat out of him?" Turns out that's the case because he knows something's up. He's like, "Yo, I know what went down. Granted, you did a lot to cover your tracks. Like the lights went out like not last episode, but the episode before last, and we can't see anything from the security footage because the power went out." So. But he starts beating the piss out of him. He's like, oh, you knew this was coming. What kind of upbringing did your grandfather put you through? Because it's like you made sure the only thing you drunk was tea because the last thing you needed was any food on your stomach when you're getting the crap beat out of you. But it's like, yeah, this is because you got Yoshino dragged into something, didn't you? And he was like, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Because he's like, yeah, Shoma said the exact same story. And it's like, why would Shoma... Because Shoma's not doing this for Kirishima's sake. He's doing it for Yoshino's sake because it's like... she might be restricted and she won't be able to live her life as freely as she wants to. Like, she might suffer some ramifications because Renji would never do anything to necessarily hurt his granddaughter. So it is a thing of he probably would restrict her, or maybe he would hurt her. I don't know, but there'd probably be some consequences for her getting involved. And he's kind of hiding the fact. He's like, oh, was this about Yoshino? And he was like, no, it wasn't, which we know home dude the tough guy was the one he was actually there for Yoshino. So why isn't he telling that to Renji? It's like, well, because Kirishima's, I guess, playing a lot of stuff close to the vest. Because it makes you wonder how much of this stuff he's talked to his grandfather about, if at all. He's probably keeping all of this close to his vest because it's like he wants to see what moves are being made. Because once again, he's part of the Yakuza, but he's actually not officially part of the Yakuza. So I don't know what that means in the grand scheme of things for him. Because it does seem like his only focus is looking after Yoshino. And, but yeah, he was saying like, yeah, those guys from episode 2 came for revenge, and Renji's like, yeah, that Ozu kid like got them involved and stuff. So this was just a personal thing of yours that Yoshino just happened to get dragged into. He's like, yeah, but he's like, hey, I got to give you props. Like, he's like, he made some comment about like how this isn't the right word. I forgot what it was. He was just saying like, he was basically commenting on like Kirishima's weird obligations, where it's just kind of like, man, you go so above and beyond, kind of like you're a little too rigid when it comes to that. I can't remember the exact wording, and I'm not paraphrasing it right, but he's like, right, I'm gonna leave Yoshino in your care, you know. So he's the one, and so he eventually goes and talks with Shoma. And so that becomes a whole thing where he's revealing to Shoma like, yo, me and Yoshino are dating. And at first I was like, he's going out of his way to push his buttons. It's like, all right, but it's also like Kirishima isn't like, yeah, him and Shoma have beef and he might say stuff, but like to go this far, I was like, but we find out later on why. Because he wanted both of them to tussle, because that way, when they do like ever go in front, like they would have to they'd have to avoid Yoshino for a while, and they'd be keeping these wounds for a while. So it's like, yeah, we might as well make it seem like a scuffle. That way Yoshino doesn't know that Renji beat them up, and especially because he beat them up for her sake, because of her. Like they don't want to like make her. It might even not even be about Renji, and like I said, like or like what Renji might do to Yoshino. It might just be like, no, we neither one of them specifically. Shoma just didn't want Renji to like didn't want Yoshino to feel any guilt about like that happening to them because of her. So. But yeah, the two of them tussle because Kirishima, trying to degrade Shoma by being like, right, you're just a loyal dog. Because the whole point is like, Shoma would never like beat up someone in front of Yoshino. And that's kind of something that Yoshino like appreciates about him. But it's kind of the thing of we've seen time and time again, and that was kind of meant to be a dig against Kirishima. He has never stopped being in front of Yoshino to stop him from beating the ever-living life out of somebody. And once again, that might be a little bit more of his grandfather in him, which we did find out that apparently Renji and Gaku have had rock, paper, scissors competitions, and they've like he's always lost. And now it's kind of like, no wonder you were okay with the rock, paper, scissors situation, Kirishima. You knew you were going to win. And even Yoshino's talking to Tsubaki about it later, being like, don't you think that's kind of unfair? It's like, well, you made the bet. A deal is a deal. So it's kind of like it's this whole back and forth of like, oh, both of you underestimating yourselves. And she thought she had that figured out, but it's like, nah, just seems like that family's just that damn good with rock, paper, scissors, apparently. But either way, getting back to it, like I said, he was degrading Shoma by being like, oh, she chose me. We're dating now, so that means she chose me over you. Someone who's so loyal. You don't even have to follow, like, he's like, but you're so stupid, Kirishima. You think any of us are ordered to do what we're doing? He's like, no, we've all been given the freedom we want to do. We can do whatever we want. And for him, it's like, I want to look after Yoshino. And he's like, yeah, but he's almost basically saying like, you're such a trained dog. You don't even realize that you're being worked and you're being used. And he tried to throw it back at Kirishima, but like, you're the one being used. So ends in a scuffle between the two of them. Cause he talked about like the guy I referenced before. It's like that guy looked after Yoshino. There's always someone that looks after Yoshino. First it was him, then it was you, and now it's me, and this is my job, and you're kind of obsolete. So if you want to kill me, you might as well take your shot. And so both of them fight, and it gets pretty deadly because Kirishima ended up stealing some kitchen knives and ended up they ended up fighting with. Made it fair though. It's like, I have a knife, you have a knife. Let's kind of kick this in overdrive. He probably accounted for Kirishima. I mean, Kirishima probably accounted for Yoshino tracking them, so he probably knew it was only a matter of time before that situation got busted up. He probably calculated that. So, but yeah, she does come bat in hand because she's like, oh, Shoma's in a park. If he wouldn't be too far away from me, so it's like, all right, there's something going on here. Because apparently, like, the tracking device she put on Kirishima, it's like she kind of had to return it, so she gave it to Shoma for a bit to kind of hold on to, and that's how she was able to track them. But before we get back to that, her and Tsubaki had an interesting conversation where it's like, well, you guys are dating now. And she's like, almost kind of like, oh, I'm surprised. I would have kind of never expected that to happen. But for Yoshino, it's like, right, she talks about kind of the calculated risk she took with that. And we kind of get more of that expanded upon when she's talking to Shoma and Kirishima. But either way, Tsubaki is saying, like, oh, you need to be careful. Like, the fact of the matter is that once he becomes a grown-up, he might gobble you whole or something. Because it's like, oh, that guy's like a salesman using a word or two to, like, get into your house. And the moment he sits down and talks to you, you're kind of done because he's going to get you to sign the contract. It's like Kirishima's that sly and dangerous. So you might want to be a little careful about that. And it's just like... It's once again, it's a very tangled web we weave with this situation because both of them, like, we know where Yoshino stands. It's kind of all not a game in the sense of like it is a game, but it's also like she's trying to win this, and it seems like Kirishima's trying to win it too. But we don't fully know whether it is a thing of he genuinely does love Yoshino, because I think that's something Shoma says to him, like, you'll never, like, no one will ever love you. She will never love you. And he's kind of like, I'm perfectly fine with that, but all I need is Yoshino. Like, so beyond that, like, I don't know if he'll ever be like, oh, I'm fine with her never loving me, or will it be a thing of, I think given enough time, she can naturally fall in love with me. Maybe it's a thing of he's perfectly fine with, like, and like I said, just feels like there are moments where he gets caught off guard where it's like, it feels like he's genuine with his feelings, but it's always weird for a two-road, like, he doesn't look at love as like a two-way street, because it's kind of like a, hey, I can love you, but I never quite ever believe or think that anyone could love me. Like, I don't know if that's kind of like Kirishima's situation. Like, I don't know if that's a complex that he has. But yeah, getting back to it, Yoshino busts up the function, and basically it's something that she does with Shoma, which is such a weird thing of, hey, I'm going to basically, when Shoma fights someone else, I'm going to make him and the person he fought exchange shirts and fix each other's shirts. He's like, because this way, she's like, this way Shoma will be less likely to get into fights. And I think it has worked up to a certain extent. Because, like, I mean, I guess that's also why he chooses not to fight or hit someone in front of him, because he knows, like, what that's going to turn into. But also, like, he cares too much about Yoshino and her opinion, and he would never want to do anything like that in front of her. But, like I said, Kirishima looks at that as kind of a weakness, whereas, like, no one else does. So, once again, maybe that speaks more volumes about Kirishima than it does about Shoma, Yoshino, or anyone else. And even, but going back to what I was saying before too, like Yoshino saying, like, right, me dating you, he's like, do you know why I started dating? He's like, yeah, because I won the bet. She's like, no, that was just a means of all of that. She's like, I would have dated you eventually anyway. That just expedited things. It's just because she's like, I know, she's like, Shoma's actually the reason why we're dating. It's like, because I've lived with Shoma for a long time, and I know him. He knows me better than anyone else. I forgot, like, exactly the full point she was making. I think it was kind of like a Shoma kind of doesn't like you thing, and I know that could probably turn into an issue later on. So it is that thing, keep your friends close, your enemies closer, and Kirishima's not necessarily in the enemy territory, but he kind of is, because he's the one you're trying to beat in this game you've got going on. And so it's like, you should, like, kind of like, Shoma is one of the most important people to me. So, like, you'll never kind of replace that. You can never, like, hope to compete with how important he is to me type of situation. So, she's trying to make that clear to Kirishima. And tells him to, like, go back. It's like, right, we'll talk about this more when we get back to Tokyo. And for Kirishima, he ends up leaving with Tsubaki, who reveals, like, oh, you were fighting to cover up your wounds. He's like, was I too obvious about that? She's like, no, but kind of laying on, like, Yoshino isn't as, like, doesn't miss stuff as much as you think she is. She is pretty understanding. Like, she figured what that was all about. and Tsubaki's kind of like a trying to give him advice on how he should approach this situation. It's like she's saying like, you are keeping stuff from Yoshino. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm pretty open. Like, I never hide anything from her. It's like, okay, invite her back to your house, watch a movie or whatever. No, study together, and then look at a graduation album. He's like, what? She's like, yeah, that's what typical high schoolers would do, right? She's like, oh, I love looking at a love story unfold. So she's trying to give advice. She's from like a secondhand bystander. I mean, to be fair, Yoshino kind of drags her into this. And I think even if Yoshino didn't, Tsubaki's invested in the whole situation. So, I mean, she's been invested in it since since we as the audience got introduced to her. What was that, episode 5 or something like that? We got introduced to her and like her meeting Kirishima for the first time too. So it's an interesting point that they lead the episode off on, where Shoma and Yoshino are talking, and basically he calls her dumb because he's like, you've accepted dating with him, but you don't know kind of what the aftermath of it is. Because she brings up like, oh, you've got a girlfriend, right? He's like, oh, I think we kind of broke up. She's like, again? He's like, yeah, it is what it is. But it's like, I guess she was almost trying to ask him for dating advice, because she's like, I don't know what it actually means to date. He's like, yeah, that's my point. That's why I call you dumb, because you haven't really thought this through as much as you claim to kind of make it seem like you have. You're still kind of flying by the seat of your pants. Yeah, you got a good grasp on things, but you haven't thought about a lot of things in the long run, because you're kind of, have no experience in this territory. But she kind of makes a point of, she wouldn't mind, because she was asking like, kind of like, what was she was trying to make? Like, I think she was trying to make a point of like, are you jealous? Do you want to date me? He was like, oh no, that's disgusting. That's why I'm wondering, like, with the whole, I don't know, maybe he legitimately does have feelings. I think he does love Yoshino, but it might be a different type of love of like, it might just be like you are family to me. I can never look at you in that intimate, that like a significant other type of way. I can never could. Or maybe those lines blur so much that it's like, we're like, I love you so much that it's beyond just like family, significant other, friend, like that. It's just it's an undescribable love. It's kind of its own thing. Like, it might be like but this is also familial in the regard. I'm about to say, like, it could be like unconditional love that typically gets associated with familial love, but I don't know. But she was making the point of like, hey, we could, we could both end up working a decent enough job and basically end up living together. She's like, for the rest of our lives, that wouldn't be too bad. And Yoshino, Shoma agrees with that. He's like, yeah, that wouldn't be too bad either. She's like, yeah, but you'd have to give up smoking. And he doesn't say anything. She's like, what is your reply to that? He just sucks his teeth like, so I don't know. That is kind of interesting. Because she had asked, like, what would be a guy that would be good enough for me to date? That someone that everyone would be okay with me dating. And Shoma was like, it would have to be someone that would be able to kill me. Because he even told Yoshino, like, yo, if you hadn't showed up, I would have killed him. Like, I'm not afraid to like kill him. And it's like, that's the thing of like, it seems pretty even, but I guess Shoma's like, if I really, really mean it, I will kill that bastard. I'm not afraid to kill him. But I'm like, has Kirishima shown us everything he can do? Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how this all plays out going forward. I believe the next episode's the finale. I don't know if it's the finale or if it's just going to be the season finale. I don't know if there's going to be a season 2 situation with this or not. Obviously, the manga is still ongoing, I think. The number I keep seeing is it's currently at 8 volumes, so I don't know how much of the manga we've covered so far. But once again, the manga's not even done, so who knows how much of the story's left. I don't know where it is storyline in the manga, like whether we're nearing the end in the manga, or has it still got plenty of story left to go. So a lot of that has to be considered, but I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all this, because there is quite a bit unresolved. I mean, we got introduced to like what appears to be our kind of antagonist, but like there's so much setup that I'm like, it feels like this is just going to be the setting stage for season 2. It doesn't seem like there's going to end off on some resolution, you know what I mean? But we'll see how it ultimately ends up playing out. Like I said, I haven't looked into it, but I'll look into it more next episode to see whether or not, like I said, the next episode, whether it's the season finale, because I do believe it's only supposed to be 12 episodes for this season, but once again, I stress that every time. I Google this stuff, so like the articles or the things I come across could be mistaken. But Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.